Well, back home, Sky News can reveal that former state premiers and members of parliament who were on the generous old pension scheme that ended in the early 2000s will not be hit by the government's controversial superannuation tax. Treasurer Jim Chalmers' office confirmed this with Sky News yesterday. There has been controversy since the election concerning this superannuation tax to come into effect from July the 1st that the government is trying to get through the Senate. It increases the tax on superannuation fund earnings in funds worth more than $3 million from 15% to 30%. It underpins the government's current budget numbers and is also controversial because it taxes paper profits or gains that have yet to be realised. Now that Labor can pass legislation through the Senate with the votes of the Greens only, it appears likely to come into effect, as Greens Senator David Shoebridge indicated on the program last week.
We've never thought it's a great idea for people with multi-million dollar superannuation balances to get a massive tax concession. Well, you know, somebody working at McDonald's is paying.
So you'd like the tax
rates
to be higher, or are you saying the government's proposal might be something you're open to passing through?
Well, we're always open to proposals that make our tax system fairer.
So the government claims it will hardly affect any people, but given the $3 million is not indexed, more and more people will be captured every year, and it will end up raising $40 billion over 10 years for the budget. I spoke to the PM about this 2 days out from the election. Why are you seeking to hurt people who have invested with their super?
Let's be very clear here, Andrew, if there are 200 people watching this program, or for every 200, if it's an average across the Australian population, then one of those 200 will be impacted. Just 0.5% of people. People who are already getting a considerable benefit, a concession if you like, will still get a concession. It will just be less than they're getting at the moment.
Well, there has been some conjecture post-election that politicians and former politicians on the old defined benefit scheme, such as Anthony Albanese and Peter Dutton, will not be hit by this tax. There's also been speculation that senior public servants who are protected by the Constitution won't be taxed because the legislation governing it says some constitutionally protected superannuants are exempt. The Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, gave a firm denial that it wouldn't saying it wouldn't affect federal politicians last week.
So will the likes of Peter Dutton and Anthony Albanese, who both entered Parliament before 2004, be subject to these super tax increases?
Yes, and we've made that clear. You know, you read from time to time on social media that somehow politicians on the old scheme before 2004 have somehow been exempted. That's not the case. Politicians on defined benefit will be impacted if they've got very substantial balances by the changes we're proposing.
Well, we've asked more questions on the draft legislation, and we received from the Treasurer's office a government document yesterday that states that some judges will be exempt from this tax, but says former federal politicians won't be. But crucially, it also says some former state office holders won't be hit. And the Treasurer's office has confirmed this includes former premiers and state members of parliament. So the document says, quote, the measure will apply to Commonwealth defined benefit schemes, especially Commonwealth ministers and public servants. Any past or future federal politicians with more than $3 million in super will pay tax under the measure. It goes on. The measure is intended to apply as broadly as possible, only excluding individuals where the Constitution requires it. Only those earning in superannuation funds that the Constitution prevents being taxed by the government will be excluded. These are the earnings related to a small number of individuals that are constitutionally protected, e.g. some Commonwealth judges and state high office holders. This includes, quote, a Justice of the High Court or a Justice of a court created by the Parliament in the superannuation fund established under the Judges Pension Act 1968, appointed prior to the commencement of this tax, and state high-level office holders, including state judges and state governors. This cohort will only be taxed on earnings in other self-managed funds. So the likes of Bob Carr, Nick Greiner, Jeff Kennett, even Jacinta Allen who was elected in 1999, won't be hit by the tax if they get to $3 million, which a couple of them at least probably have. Now, here is the full list, or close to it, of the sort of people who will be constitutionally exempt from the tax. You can see they're a governor of a state, their staff, a minister of the government of a state, their staff, the clerk of the House of State Parliament, a head of a state parliament department, a head of a state public service department, a solicitor general, and a police deputy or assistant commissioner.